Salams from the People's Dispatch Studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani and you're watching Daily Debrief. On the show today, we're talking about India's potential new Data Privacy Act in the context of Pegasus, of course, and other spyware. We're talking about a constitutional referendum that's upcoming in Tunisia. And finally, Bernie Sanders is joining the ranks of striking workers at Kellogg. First up, according to a Bloomberg report yesterday, the Israeli spyware company NSO is weighing its options. It's considering whether to shut down its Pegasus unit or refinancing so that it can deal with mounting debt. The controversial and widely misused Pegasus software accounts for nearly 50% of the company's revenue. According to this Bloomberg report, $200 million are expected from investors in the United States. Prabir is in the house, in fact, has written an exhaustive piece this morning on NewsClick examining India's attempts at framing data privacy laws and legislation. Prabir, connect the dots for us, if you will. Will this potential Data Privacy Act protect us from spyware, malicious spyware like Pegasus?
First is, of course, it was not the misuse of Pegasus which is the problem.
Right.
It was use of Pegasus, because Pegasus from the beginning was meant to do exactly what it has done in the world. Access people's phones and make it accessible to the clients who have bought the Pegasus software. So that's the basic objective of it. And it was not actually capturing data of the stream of data which passes from you to me. It is actually either hacking my phone or your phone. So when you look at companies like Pegasus, this is really the function of these companies, to hack phones. So it's not that you are intercepting data which is lawfully being generated and say a particular agency of the government is accessing that data and then misusing it. And this brings up the data privacy bill that you are really referred to, which is to be placed before the parliament, India's parliament. Now, data privacy has two parts to it. One is, what is the access that government has to our data? And this is being made much more onerous for us because new digital IDs are being created, and also what government, the information that we have to give to the government or the government has to give us services. For both of these IDs are being created and then we are being asked to give our data to the government. Now, giving this through government created infrastructure, there was a requirement that Supreme Court had laid down that any new digital ID must have a purpose, and that purpose must be what the government then has to decide through a legal mechanism, an act of parliament for that specific purpose. It cannot be decided arbitrarily by the government.
Right.
But increasingly what we find, and COVID-19 of course has given also this specific loophole, that for public health purposes we need to do certain things, therefore a health ID, and therefore linking all our health data, also our movement data, to this particular ID. Now, this creates the issues which had come up in a Supreme Court case where it talked about the privacy of Indian citizens, and it had pronounced that privacy is really a part of a right to life and liberty. It related it to the right to life and liberty issue, and therefore it accepted this is a fundamental right of the citizen.
Right.
Unfortunately, in this specific bill, what has happened is that there's an omnibus exemption from the privacy requirement for state agencies, which means the state can get any data it wants, use it for whatever purpose, and the privacy protection that we are supposed to have against misuse of our data does not exist. And in fact, Justice Sri Krishna, who had prepared the report after the Supreme Court judgment, on whose report supposedly this act is based, has actually said it will create an Orwellian state. So it is not meant to protect privacy. As far as the state is concerned, it is really to make data available to the state. The second part of it, and I think that's the other issue, so I think you should follow up the question.
I should follow up.
So I think this is one aspect of it, but the other aspect, of course, is the commercialization of our data.
Absolutely. So, which is what we are going to come to next. Both through these IDs that are being created without, like you said, a legal framework, and in general, the government's push to sort of make as much digital as possible. What is that sort of process of commercialization and who is exactly benefiting from it?
So here is the issue. The Privacy Data Protection Act, or bill as it is now, was supposed to be protecting our privacy. In this, there is an equal part of what will be done to the data the government or private parties collect.
Right.
And the idea is how to commercialize this data. Of course, private parties were always collecting our data, and what will be their role in protecting this data? If the data breach takes place, how to inform us? All those things are supposed to be there in the Act.
Right.
We have to see how much teeth it will have or it will not have. But I think the dangerous part here is also the following, that the government collects a huge amount of data, and the way it is going to collect much more data from us. As you said, the health ID is one of those specific cases. What does it do with the data? It seems it wants to commercialize this data, give this data over to private parties.
Third parties, right.
Third parties. Already we can see the Aadhaar infrastructure there. Our biometric ID infrastructure is being used by private parties. Of course, it can pay the government a certain amount for that. But basically making the data, it is forcing us to give, commercializing it is also the other purpose of the Data Privacy Act. And again, the danger of it is that I give to government data believing it is something that I have to do as a civic duty.
Right.
The health ID was essentially tied to also my movement.
Dealing with the pandemic and all of those
Dealing
things.
with the pandemic and therefore my movement. But when, for instance, as has recently come out in RTI, Right to Information Act, somebody filed for this information, it seems that medical authorities have given this kind of sensitive information to the police agencies.
Right.
And this means that my right to privacy is vitally affected by this kind of disclosure. Of course, there is a much bigger danger of it going also to the insurance companies who might deny me a job.
Healthcare operators.
Healthcare operators might deny me benefits, saying that, oh, you had a pre-existing condition 30 years back and therefore you're not eligible, because the data record will be available for them to argue that. I can go into court and fight it. Or, for instance, my employer who said, you know, I don't think you are as healthy as I want you to be, therefore you are not, will not give you a job. Now, these are the kind of information that they get access to.
Right.
And I think that is also dangerous, and therefore the privacy provision, in fact, instead of being observed through this Act, it is at the moment this current infrastructure, the current provisions of the Act actually do not encourage this belief. It seems to be more for commercializing data and making the data available to the government, for really the surveillance state.
So in fact, the name itself is disingenuous in that sense of the Act itself.
Yes, the objective was privacy. The
and
net
the actual
output is commercialization and surveillance.
Absolutely.
That seems to be the way it is going. Right. And this is what the members of parliament who were in the committee have also said. The opposition members have said this and registered their dissent on this.
All right. Thanks so much, Prabhi. Now, Tunisia will hold a constitutional referendum next July, President Kais Saied announced on Monday, months after he seized broad powers in a move that his opponents called a coup. In a speech on national television on Monday, Kais Saied said that the parliament of Tunisia would remain suspended until the people of that country vote for a replacement assembly on December 17th, 2022. I spoke earlier to People's Dispatch's Abdul for the details. So, Abdul, what are the latest reports coming in from Tunisia, and how are people reacting to this speech that Kais Saied made on national television on Monday?
There was a protest. There has been protest basically going on for last 6 months and so. And most of the opposition politicians are, of course, opposed to this latest thing, which basically means what Saied did basically is to dissolve the parliament. Though he's saying it is not dissolved, but by default it is dissolved. There is no other way to interpret it. Then you will see that since July there has been a consistent opposition, primarily led by Nahda, but other left-wing parties also have said this, that this is very much like a presidential coup. So people are speaking on that particular line itself. Many of the observers have basically have come out with the point that it looks like that Saied is planning to, in a way, reimpose the kind of a political system which was there before the 2011 revolution. though it is too early to say all those things, but it seems that there are genuine fear among the people. Though a section of the Tunisians, by the way, of course, young people who are fed up with the current political establishment, post-revolutionary, what we call the post-Arab Spring political elite in the country, who have failed miserably to deliver on all the promises which were made after the revolution in 2011. So there is a mixed kind of reaction from Tunisia coming. But as the majority of the political parties, political groups, trade unions, and other relevant political actors are quite angered with the things which were announced yesterday. Yeah.
So also in his speech, there was a section where he talked of correcting the path of the revolution and of history. What do you interpret from this language and what he's saying?
That's what I was saying earlier, that there is a fear that the things which were achieved post 2011, Saied represents a section which kind of wants to go back. There is always a nostalgia among the political elite in Tunisia, just like what happened in Egypt. If you see that the ruling establishment, particularly the ruling classes, which felt that they have lost a lot of ground after the revolution, that there is kind of backing assertion that those things will be revived. In other words, it will mean that, see, in Egypt, it was kind of the garb which was used was the defense of secularism. The secular principles are threatened because of the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in power. Ennahda is also like Muslim Brotherhood, so that kind of in the name of corruption, in the name of rising economic concerns. Of course, these are genuine problems. Tunisia has been facing political instability. There has been a kind of threat to economic, basic economic rights of the people, rising unemployment, rising poverty. The larger economy is in very bad shape, and particularly due to the COVID and all those things are correct. Corruption is an issue, of course. All these are issues which are genuine issues. These are used basically to delegitimize the political assertion, political achievements which were made after the Tunisian Arab Spring Revolution. So this is basically, it looks like that there is a reassertion of the political elite of the pre-2011 period.
And finally, this vote that is now slated for December 17 on a new parliament, as it were, how is that likely to go?
I think for next few, as he said, that there will be a referendum, a kind of referendum. Then there will be a change in the existing constitution, which was enacted in 2014. There will be public surveys, a kind of public feedback, how to go about it. All these things, as if now, it is not very clear that how it will turn out, given the fact that the political opposition is also divided. The section which are supporting the measures taken by Saied, and there are a section opposed to those things. And therefore, it is very uncertain, it is not, I will say it is not right to basically say what will happen. But that will be too much speculation. But it looks like that the popular mobilizations on the street will increase, given the fact that a large number of people, despite the fact that the Prime Minister and the executive section of the government was unpopular, the role of the parliament was seen as not problematic. Now, guys, Saied basically has dissolved the parliament, which basically can create more popular uprising against his measures.
Thanks very much for that update, Abdul. And finally, Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders, an independent US Senator from Vermont since 2007, will rally with striking Kellogg's workers outside the breakfast cereal manufacturer's plant in the city of Battle Creek, Michigan on Friday. The company had earlier announced that last week that it would replace these striking workers for rejecting a 5-year tentative agreement. Around 1,400 Kellogg's workers at 4 plants in Michigan, Omaha, Nebraska, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Memphis, Tennessee have rejected the deal. What is Bernie going, Anish, to Michigan for, and what do the workers hope to achieve at this stage where clearly there's no coming together between management and the striking workers?
I wouldn't say there is no coming together, because obviously the company, it will be very difficult for them to replace 1,400 employees in a single go.
Right.
Especially at a time when there is so much political pressure on the company as well. There are now plans, we have heard, of them trying to move part of the production to Mexico, like kind of outsource the labor with cheaper labor, you know. President Biden has also raised issues with that, with ethical issues, he has pointed out, with the practices that the company is trying to go for rather than engage with collective bargaining. This is not new in the US. For the past 2 years now, we have seen companies trying to threaten workers into submission, especially when they go for strikes or if they are not agreeing to deals or contract agreements that the companies give. They are often threatened with
any sort of collective bargaining.
Any sort of collective action. Forget bargaining. We are talking about any amount of collective action, whether or not it is unionized. We have seen major companies, major brands, in fact, go to the point where they have threatened replacing workers with cheaper ones. It's nothing new. In this case, they have actually put out a proper advertisement where they actually mentions that the vacancies are to replace these striking workers.
Right.
And that actually is something, it kind of encourages what is called scavenging in the United States, where you basically become a different kind of labor worker, working for cheaper to undermine a strike. So that sort of thing. So this is something that has been done. They are trying to go a step further by actually putting out vacancies in this regard. But to say that there is still no room for agreement or any room for reconciliation is also wrong, because, as I said, it's a large number of workers, 4 major plants. It's not going to be that easy for them to completely replace the entire. The whole point is to intimidate workers into submission. And this also shows how much the company is reluctant to actually give in to some of the very justified demands that workers have been asking. It is not like Kellogg is going through any kind of loss at this point. It's financially quite stable. They've made, in fact, more than $1 billion in profits last year. Their sales have increased significantly, and this is all during the pandemic.
Right.
So for them to say that something like that for them is unfeasible is not true. But we have when people like Bernie Sanders come to the picture, there is a lot of political pressure coming in, and there's also it's not just Sanders is one of the sort of support that you can actually get for these workers. We've seen when it comes to the advertisement, the vacancies that they put up for replacing these workers, how Redditors came in to actually pretty much block the website and shut it down by filling it with bogus applications. That shows that there is a large popular support for these workers, because, as I said, these are not demands that are very new or unjustified in any ways for that matter. These are demands that most workers right now, be it in the food and agriculture sector, delivery services, everywhere, they're actually putting these same demands up. And those demands are not something and those demands actually connect to a large number of American working class families. And that shows how universal this fight is right now.
Right. So what exactly did the company offer in this new deal, which they are so upset about the workers having rejected?
One of the issues that the workers have raised about is the two-tier system of wages, which is like newer workers will have lesser benefits, less wages. So the difference is quite huge. We're talking about new workers earning about around $22 per hour, and as compared to the more experienced ones who earn about $35 per hour. And so the difference is quite like $13, and that's more than the minimum wage in most places, if you understand the scale of it. So this kind of two-tiered wage system is problematic. Workers have called it out as an issue that really needs to be fought against. There also, this two-tier system also affects their benefits, their healthcare coverage, the contributions that they put in their medical care coverage, all sorts of things. So this shows that that even the established workers are not very happy with it. Even though they are benefiting from it, they're not very happy with it. The deal was rejected quite overwhelmingly. I think more than 90% or close to that was rejected the deal. It was almost unanimous. So they are not doing away with it, but they are trying to put up pathways, like fast-track pathways, so that most workers would end up being in the higher bracket in by the end of the contract, which is also a very good way of saying, like, we are not going to do away with it. The newer ones will face even further. Like the ones who are there already can actually graduate into being the more experienced, like veteran category workers. The other issue is the wage hike that the company offered, which is about 3%. It was 3% for the first year, and then will be cost adjusted in the next 2 years. So it's a 3-year contract. And so this was not something that even the workers wanted. They wanted a consistent hike over the annually for the rest of the contract period. And that is something that the company has also not agreed upon. There are other issues as well, but these are some of the primary issues, and which actually cut short a lot of benefits. There are also concerns about health cost coverage, and as I said, like during the pandemic, something like healthcare coverage is very essential to most working class Americans, and that is if you're going to put a large part of the burden of healthcare on the workers themselves, cutting from their salaries, or making them contribute a larger share than what is justified, it is definitely going to affect them in the long run. So things like that, issues like that are still unresolved. The company is not ready to accept any kind of middle ground at this point. We're talking about months, like close to a year. We're talking about close to a year of negotiations coming to this.
19 rounds of
negotiations. Exactly. And the strike just started in October. So much before that, workers have been trying to call for a better, justified deal, but it's something that the company cannot offer, or is not willing to offer rather. So this is definitely becoming an issue. So them deciding to go ahead with the strike despite the threat of replacement is something that shows that workers are convinced that their demands are not something that can be just thrown away like that.
They're justified.
Exactly.
Absolutely. We'll be keeping an eye on that, Anish. Thanks for that. That's all we have on the show for today. You've been watching Daily Debrief. For more on these stories and everything else that we do, you can visit our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and follow us on all the regular social media platforms. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.